Good morning. At the end of the gospel of today, Jesus kind of drops this line, this question, but when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? It's a good question. It though seems like out of place in a set of readings that seem to be focused on persistence in prayer. But Jesus still drops it. When the Son of Man comes back to earth, will he find faith on earth? But let us look at the readings first. Exodus 17 is the first reading of today, in which we hear how Moses climbs to the top of the hill with a couple of helpers, Aaron and Hur. And the context here is a battle between the Israelites and the Amalekites. So way up in the mountain, we have Moses praying for victory. And way down in the valley, we have Joshua fighting in the trenches, a frontliner. As long as Moses kept his hands raised up, Israel had the better of the fight. But when he gave his arms rest, the opponents had the better of the fight. And then suddenly we see the persistence of Aaron and Hur, who supported Moses' hands, one on each side, so that the hands of Moses will remain in the open position of prayer, so that Israel may have the better of the fight. So here in this reading, we see the persistence of Moses. And when his arms get tired, we see the persistence of Aaron and Hur as they lift up his arms. And down in the trenches, we have the persistence of the Israelites fighting the good fight. So that's persistence in the first reading of today. But then we go to the second reading, which is 2 Timothy, in which we hear persistence as well. Because this is what St. Paul says, I charge you, in the presence of God and of Jesus Christ, proclaim the word. Be persistent, whether it is convenient or inconvenient. Convince, reprimand, encourage through all patience and teaching. So, Paul is challenging Timothy as a minister of the church to be persistent in his ministry. Don't give up. Challenge when you need to challenge. If you can convince and encourage, great. But if you can't, then reprimand. Be persistent, but be patient. So we see that same theme of persistence in the second reading of today. And finally, we move to the Gospel of Luke, which is this famous parable of the persistent widow. And she's screaming for justice and just keeps bothering the judge for a fair judgment. And we hear that for a long time the judge was unwilling. But eventually he thought, it's true, I don't fear God or human beings. But this widow keeps bothering me. So I shall deliver a just decision for her, lest she finally come and strike me. Poof! He was afraid of that. He had no faith. But still, even though he didn't act out of faith, out of fear, because of the persistence of the widow, he rendered her justice. So, really, we see here in this parable the persistence of that widow. As I reflect on these readings, and I highlight on this theme of persistence, I cannot think but the persistence of the saints. For example, our patron saints, beginning with St. James, the apostle, that he brought the gospel as far as Spain. He had to go through the entire Mediterranean, crossing to the limits of the Roman Empire to get to that particular place. In Spain, there is that famous pilgrimage route called the Camino de Santiago. which is miles and miles to reach the tomb of St. James. Bishop Bruce is doing the Camino next week, so pray for him as he is doing that pilgrimage. I also think on the persistence of Bishop, because he just had his knee done in the summer and he's going to do the Camino. So that's another example of persistence right there. I think of St. Boniface, who was so persistent in his ministry to the Germans, who were pagan at the time and who believed in many gods, but he kept going at it towards the end of the first millennium. I keep also thinking about the persistence of St. Juan Diego, who persistently came back to the bishop of Tenochtitlan, Mexico, Bishop Fray Juan de Zumárraga, that indeed Our Lady of Guadalupe had appeared to Juan Diego, and Juan Diego kept persistent in his endeavor of convincing the bishop that indeed Our Lady had appeared to him. And finally, we are given the gift of the mantle of the tilma, the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. But he had to be persistent, otherwise people would have ruled him out. He would have been canceled, but he was persistent. And that's why we have this amazing devotion of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So the persistence of the saints gives us courage to persevere in the faith. But let us go back for a moment to the image of Moses' arms being stretched out towards heaven, supported by his friends Aaron and Hur. I ask you this question. When Jesus was in the cross, his hands open were also being supported by two people, one on his left and one on his right. Can you guess who they are? The thieves. The two thieves. They may not have been supporting his hands with the spirit of persistence of Aaron and Hur, but Jesus came to save them both. They were so lost due to their crimes and due to their past lives. They had a history, and it was public, and they were being condemned because of that. But their lost condition was what kept Jesus' arms up in prayer to the Father for mercy to save them both. Their sinfulness and their need for salvation is what gave Jesus the courage to keep the arms up, because they both needed the salvation of the Father. Just think about that. Faith is trust. At the cross, Jesus in his humanity had to trust completely to the Father in the master plan that the Father had to save all humanity, but most immediately to the two right next to him. Jesus came for both of them. But in his humanity, because of the pain that Jesus was experiencing in his body, it would have been easy for him just to give up and to walk away. In fact, he would rather not drink from the chalice of suffering, as he said it on the night of Holy Thursday. But he had to have trust, faith in the larger plan of the Father. And only when Jesus found support in the brokenness of those two men next to him, that's when he was able to keep his arms up in prayer, in supplication to the Father for mercy for them and for us. It was only then that he was able to persevere until handing over the Spirit. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So, faith is celebrating the perseverance of Jesus. At the end of today's gospel, Jesus dropped the line, "When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" it seems like he's not going to find a lot of faith. At least if you watch the news, you kind of see that. But he may find yours, and he may find mine. As simple as our faith may be, may the little faith that we have be enough for Jesus to keep his arms up in perseverance and persistence and fidelity to the master plan of salvation of the Father for the human race. Amen.